She thought it was a fake wedding. Then the millionaire whispered, "Nothing will be cancelled." Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The air inside the grand ballroom was heavy with roses and flashlights, the kind of perfection that didn't feel real. Ella Thompson stood frozen in front of the mirror, layers of white silk cascading down to her trembling hands. Just hours ago, she was a waitress folding napkins at a downtown restaurant. Now, somehow, she was in a wedding dress that wasn't hers, about to say vows she didn't mean. Her reflection looked like a stranger about to marry Adrian Hale, the youngest tech millionaire in New York, a man she'd met only twice, and never by chance. "It's only pretend," she whispered to herself, adjusting the veil. "A fake wedding, a fake smile, one day, and I'm free." That was the deal. 48 hours of pretense to save his company's reputation after his real fiancé had vanished just days before the ceremony. She would play the bride, sign a contract, get paid enough to keep her late mother's apartment, and disappear. But as the music swelled and the doors opened, her heart pounded harder than the drums. The crowd rose, hundreds of eyes turned toward her, and for a fleeting moment, it didn't feel fake at all. Adrian stood at the altar, tall and composed, his black tux fitting like a second skin, his gaze locked on her with unsettling calm. There was something unreadable in his eyes, not the cold arrogance she expected from a man of his wealth, but something deeper, quieter. The officiant's voice blurred as Ella walked down the aisle, each step echoing her doubts. When she reached him, he offered his arm, steady, warm. "Ready?" he murmured. "As I'll ever be," she breathed. The vows were simple, pre-written, transactional. She repeated each line like reciting a script, until the moment came the words, "Do you take this man?" lingered in the air. Ella hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for whispers to ripple through the guests. Then Adrian leaned close, his voice low, meant only for her. "Nothing will be cancelled," he whispered, and in that instant her breath caught. It wasn't part of the plan. The way he said it soft but firm, like a promise, sent a strange warmth through her chest. Cameras flashed, applause erupted, and the priest declared, "You may kiss the bride." It was supposed to be for show, but when Adrian's hand brushed her cheek, his touch wasn't rehearsed. The kiss was brief yet real enough to make her forget, for one dangerous heartbeat, that this was all pretend. Somewhere between the applause and the orchestra, Ella realized something terrifying. The line between fake and real had already started to blur. When the applause faded, the photographers followed them all the way to the waiting limousine. Ella kept her eyes on the bouquet in her hands, pretending not to notice the flashing lights. The white roses smelled too perfect, too expensive, like everything in Adrian Hale's world. When the door closed behind them, the silence felt heavy. Adrian loosened his tie, watching her from the corner of his eye. "You did well," he said quietly. "You did not faint, at least." Ella let out a shaky laugh. "Thanks. I will add that to my resume, professional fake bride, not prone to fainting." For the first time, a hint of amusement flickered across his usually guarded face. "You will get your payment tomorrow morning," he added. "Our agreement stands." His tone was businesslike, but something about his posture, hands unclenching on his lap, eyes softening when she glanced out the window, suggested the man was not as cold as he wanted to seem. Outside, the city blurred past, streetlights melting into streaks of gold. She watched them in silence, her reflection overlapping his in the tinted glass. It was strange, sitting beside a man whose name could buy half of Manhattan, yet he sat as still as a shadow. She wondered if he ever felt lonely in all that noise. The car stopped at the penthouse tower that would serve as their shared residence for the next few weeks. Ella's throat tightened when she stepped inside. The elevator opened into a world of marble and glass, with a view that made the city look small. "You can stay in the guest room," Adrian said, motioning to the far hallway. "No one comes here except the staff on schedule. You will have privacy." "Privacy?" she repeated under her breath. It was ironic, considering the world now thought they were husband and wife. Later, when the photographers were gone and the lights dimmed, Ella stood barefoot on the balcony. The city stretched endlessly below, a constellation of windows. Her phone buzzed a text from her landlord. Asterisk rent due by Friday, or I will have to find another tenant. Asterisk. She stared at the screen, guilt mixing with relief. This fake wedding might actually save her life. Behind her, the sliding door opened. Adrian stepped out, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He looked different under the moonlight, less CEO, more man. "You are still awake," he said softly. "Could not sleep," she replied. "Too much silk in the sheets," he chuckled once, surprising her. "You are honest, Miss Thompson. That was part of the deal, right? No lies." He nodded, gazing at the skyline. "No lies," he echoed, though his expression said he was hiding something deeper. For a long moment they stood in silence, the wind tugging at her hair. Finally she asked, "Why did you whisper that during the ceremony? Nothing will be cancelled." "What did you mean?" Adrian hesitated. "I meant the ceremony would go on, that is all." But she did not buy it. There had been emotion in his voice, something raw. She wanted to ask more, but his phone rang, cutting through the quiet. He excused himself, stepping back inside. She watched his silhouette disappear into the glow of the penthouse, wondering what kind of man carried that much power yet sounded so tired. Inside her room, Ella placed her mother's silver ring on the bedside table. It was the only thing not borrowed tonight. As she lay down, she thought of his words again. Nothing will be cancelled. Maybe he had meant it for himself. Maybe he was the one afraid of losing something real. By morning, tabloids were already splashing headlines across every feed. Asterisk, tech giant's secret bride stuns society. Asterisk, reporters camped outside the building. And Ella woke to the buzz of a dozen unanswered calls. Her heart pounded. The fake marriage had just gone public, and there was no going back. By noon, the world had turned upside down. News anchors repeated her name with exaggerated wonder. Tabloids printed close-ups of her nervous smile, and bloggers called her everything from a mystery bride to a social climber. Ella stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, the headlines glowing on her phone beside the sink. She had never been famous, never even imagined being noticed. Now her face was everywhere, and none of it felt real. When she stepped into the kitchen, Adrian was already there, dressed in a crisp white shirt, coffee in hand. He looked perfectly calm, as if chaos did not exist in his vocabulary. "I assume you have seen the news," he said without looking up. "It is impressive," she replied, half bitter, half amused. "They even found my old high school photo." "That is what happens when people smell a story," Adrian said, his tone steady. "It will die down soon." She frowned. "Easy for you to say. You are used to it." He finally met her eyes. "No one is used to it, Ella. You just learn not to flinch." His calm unnerved her more than the headlines. "So what now?" "I stay here and smile for the cameras." "You stay here," he said firmly, "and let me handle the press. The more we look united, the faster it ends." United. The word felt strange in her chest. "We are not really united," she murmured. "We are a transaction." He paused, then set his coffee down. Maybe at first. The air shifted between them, filled with something unspoken. Later that afternoon, a knock echoed through the penthouse. Adrian opened the door to reveal two assistants carrying boxes. Dresses, jewelry, invitations, props for the next step of the charade. "We have a charity gala tonight," he said, flipping through the schedule. "You will attend as my wife." Ella blinked. "Tonight? You could have warned me." "You will manage," he said simply, already walking away. For a moment, she wanted to throw something at him, but when she looked at the gown shimmering inside the box, a soft champagne color with tiny glass beads, it took her breath away. That evening, the gala unfolded like a dream she did not belong to. Flashbulbs, champagne, laughter that echoed off marble walls. Adrian guided her through the crowd with quiet confidence, his hand resting lightly on her back. Every gesture was rehearsed, yet somehow it felt protective. People whispered as they passed, curiosity painted in every stare. A woman with diamond earrings leaned close to another guest and said, just loud enough for Ella to hear, "She must be very lucky, or very clever." Ella pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the rhythm of Adrian's breathing beside her. Then came the test. During a toast, a board member named Mr. Wexler raised his glass and smiled thinly. "To our new Mrs. Hale," he announced, "the woman who captured New York's most untouchable man." Laughter rippled through the room. Adrian's jaw tightened. Before he could speak, Ella lifted her own glass. "Thank you, Mr. Wexler," she said, voice calm. "But I think Adrian captured himself long before I came along." The laughter stopped. For a heartbeat, the ballroom was silent. Then applause erupted, genuine and surprised. Adrian looked at her with something new in his eyes: respect. When they left the gala, the city lights felt softer somehow. Inside the car, neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Adrian said quietly, "You handled that perfectly." "I just told the truth," she replied. "Maybe people should hear it more often." His lips curved slightly. "You are not what I expected, Ella." "And what did you expect?" she asked. He turned his gaze to the window. "Someone afraid of breaking the script." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I am just bad at pretending." He looked back at her, eyes lingering. "Or maybe you are the first real thing to happen to me in a long time." The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Ella looked away, heart pounding, realizing that the fake lines of their contract were beginning to blur faster than either of them could stop. The days after the gala felt strangely calm. The press coverage began to soften, shifting from scandal to fascination. For the first time since the wedding, Ella could breathe without fear of another headline tearing her apart. Still, she could not shake the image of Adrian's eyes that night, how the coldness in them had melted for just a moment when she spoke up for herself. She kept telling herself it meant nothing, but her heart did not listen. Every morning she woke up to the quiet hum of the penthouse, the faint smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen where Adrian worked through emails. Their lives began to blend into a strange rhythm. They had breakfast together, sometimes in silence, sometimes with small talk that felt less like obligation and more like habit. He asked about her art, and she told him she used to sketch cityscapes on diner napkins between shifts. He seemed genuinely curious, not polite. One afternoon, while he was on a conference call, she wandered into the study. The walls were lined with books and photos of buildings, city plans, and framed newspaper covers about his company. On his desk, a folder lay open, revealing a concept drawing a new community center for underprivileged families. She could see notes written in his sharp handwriting. Free art classes, youth program, public funding. It was not what she expected from a man who ruled $1 billion empire. When he entered the room, she jumped, embarrassed. "I did not mean to snoop," she said quickly. He smiled faintly. "You did not. You are curious. That is allowed." "You are building this?" she asked, pointing to the folder. "Trying to," he replied. "If the board approves." She studied his face. "You do not look like someone who asks for approval." His laugh was quiet, tired. "Even I have bosses, Ella. They just hide behind money." The conversation stayed with her long after he left for another meeting. That night, rain streaked the windows while she sat on the couch sketching the skyline. When Adrian came home past midnight, she was half asleep, pencil still in hand. He paused, watching her for a long moment before placing a blanket over her shoulders. "Good night, Ella," he whispered, almost to himself. In the morning, she found a cup of coffee waiting on the counter and a note in his handwriting. "Thank you for last night's honesty." It was simple, but it made her heart twist in ways she could not explain. Later that week, he invited her to join him on a site visit for one of his new projects. She almost refused, but curiosity won. The construction site was loud, filled with workers and machinery. Adrian moved through it like someone who belonged to both the boardroom and the ground. He greeted people by name, asked questions, listened. It startled her. The image of the untouchable CEO faded with each word he exchanged. At one point, an older worker stumbled near the scaffolding. Adrian was the first to reach him, steadying the man before anyone else moved. "Are you all right?" he asked, genuine concern in his tone. The man nodded, and Adrian's hand lingered on his shoulder for reassurance. Watching him, Ella felt something change inside her. Maybe, she thought, this man was not pretending anymore either. On the drive back, she finally asked the question that had been eating at her. "Adrian, why did you choose me? Out of all the women you could have hired?" He kept his eyes on the road for a long moment before answering. "Because you were the only one who did not want anything from me," he said quietly. "You looked at me like a person, not a name." His honesty left her speechless. The city lights flashed across his face, revealing the smallest trace of vulnerability. She turned away, afraid he would see the warmth in her eyes. For the rest of the ride, neither spoke, but the silence between them felt different, softer, almost fragile, like a secret neither dared to touch. The following morning, the sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, painting the marble floor in shades of gold. Ella sat at the counter, stirring her coffee slowly, her sketchbook open beside her. She was drawing the community center design she had seen in Adrian's study, adding soft edges, benches, and open spaces for children to play. When Adrian entered, he stopped behind her, curious. "You changed the layout," he said, leaning slightly forward. She turned, startled but smiling. "I thought the atrium would feel warmer if it opened to the garden instead of the parking lot." He studied the drawing in silence, then nodded. "It looks better this way." There was no hint of condescension, only genuine respect. "Maybe you should come to the next board meeting," he added, half teasing. "You might scare the architects." She laughed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I am just a waitress with a pencil, remember?" "No," he said softly. "You are a woman who sees what others miss." The words lingered between them longer than they should have. For the first time, she saw how tired he looked, shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. "You work too much," she said gently. "You should rest." He gave her a small smile. "That is not how empires are built." "Then maybe that is why so many of them fall," she replied. He laughed quietly, a sound she was learning to love. Days passed, and the quiet rhythm of their shared life grew warmer. One evening, he invited her to accompany him to a corporate dinner at a downtown hotel. The air was thick with perfume and ambition. As they entered the ballroom, flashes from cameras followed their every step. People approached Adrian with champagne glasses and polished smiles, but it was Ella who drew the most attention. She wore a deep blue gown that shimmered like midnight, and her natural grace silenced even the most skeptical onlookers. A woman from the board, sleek and calculating, leaned in with a smirk. "So this is the mysterious bride," she said. "Quite a fairy tale, Adrian. Tell me, how does it feel to marry outside your circle?" Adrian's jaw tensed, but before he could respond, Ella smiled politely. "It feels honest," she said, "and honesty is rare in any circle." The woman blinked, thrown off balance, and forced a brittle laugh. Adrian looked at Ella as if seeing her for the first time. Later that night, when the music softened and the guests began to leave, he found her standing near the terrace, looking out at the city. "You keep saving me," he said quietly. She turned, surprised. "I did not know you needed saving." "More than you think," he replied. The confession was soft, almost lost beneath the sound of the wind. "I spent years surrounded by people who wanted what I had, not who I was. Then you appeared, and suddenly I did not feel so alone." Ella's heart twisted. "You should not say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" he asked. "Because it makes pretending harder." He looked at her for a long moment before stepping closer. "Maybe I am tired of pretending." For a second, she thought he might kiss her, but instead he reached out and brushed her hand gently, the touch light but deliberate. The silence between them pulsed with everything unspoken. Then his phone buzzed. The moment shattered. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening instantly. "I have to take this," he said, his voice back to its usual clipped tone. She watched him walk away, wondering what kind of call could change a man so fast. Later that night, she overheard fragments of his conversation from the hallway, words like audit, shares, and breach of contract. The tone was sharp, urgent. When she stepped back into her room, a strange unease settled over her. Something was happening beneath the surface, something that threatened to undo everything they had built together. She just did not know it yet. The following week felt heavier than the ones before. The energy in the penthouse changed, subtle but sharp, like static before a storm. Adrian left earlier, came home later, and spoke less. His phone never stopped ringing, and when it did, he looked like a man carrying the weight of an entire empire on his shoulders. Ella tried not to ask questions, but the silence between them had grown so thick it started to feel like another person in the room. One evening, she walked past his study and heard voices, Adrian's low and controlled, another man's urgent. "If the investors pull out, we will not survive the quarter," the man said. "Someone leaked the acquisition plan. It has already reached the press." "Find out who," Adrian replied, his tone sharp enough to cut glass, "and make sure it is contained." When the call ended, he remained seated, staring at the city skyline. His reflection in the glass looked nothing like the confident man she had first met. "Are you all right?" she asked softly from the doorway. He turned, startled, then forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Everything is fine, Ella. You do not look fine," he exhaled slowly. "Business trouble. It happens." "Does it have to do with the audit?" she asked carefully. His head snapped up. "How do you know about that?" "I overheard last night," she admitted. "You sounded worried." His jaw tightened, then relaxed. "It is just numbers. Nothing you need to worry about." But she could tell he was lying, not out of malice, but out of protection. That night, while he slept restlessly on the couch, Ella found herself wandering through the quiet penthouse. The city lights below looked distant, untouchable. She stopped at the window, pressing her hand against the cool glass, and whispered to herself, "Why do I care so much?" The answer came in the form of a single memory: his tired smile, his gentle voice, the way he said, "You are the first real thing to happen to me." She cared because somewhere along the way, the line between fake and real had disappeared completely. The next morning, news broke across every major network. Hale Industries under investigation for insider leaks. The media frenzy exploded again, worse than after their wedding. Ella's phone buzzed with messages she did not want to read. Downstairs, photographers had gathered outside the building, shouting questions about Adrian, about her. When Adrian returned home that night, his tie was gone, his eyes red from exhaustion. "It is bad," he admitted quietly. "Someone leaked confidential documents to sabotage the merger. The board wants to suspend me until the investigation clears." "That is ridiculous," she said. "You built that company." "It does not matter," he said bitterly. "Perception is stronger than truth." "Then let me help," she urged. "Tell me what I can do." He shook his head. "You cannot. The less you are involved, the safer you are." "Safer?" she repeated. "What are you not telling me, Adrian?" He hesitated, then turned away. "There are people who want to see me fall, and they will use anyone close to me to do it." Her heart sank. "Anyone close to you," she whispered. "Does that mean me?" He faced her again, his expression softening. "You should not have been dragged into this. I will fix it, I promise." "You cannot fix everything alone," she said. "You taught me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone in." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a second the mask cracked. "I do not want you to get hurt," he said quietly. "Then stop pushing me away," she replied. The air between them was charged, heavy with everything they could not say. Finally, he nodded slightly, as if surrendering. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will tell you everything." But by morning, he was gone. His phone went straight to voicemail, and the news channels reported that Adrian Hale had disappeared amid corporate scandal. Ella stood by the window where they had once watched the sunrise together, her reflection pale in the glass, and whispered the words that had haunted her since the wedding. "Nothing will be cancelled." She was not sure if she said it for him or for herself, but in her heart, she knew one thing was certain: she was not letting him fight alone. The next 48 hours were a blur of phone calls, headlines, and unanswered questions. Adrian's disappearance had become the top story on every major network. Reporters swarmed the building, demanding statements from anyone remotely connected to him. Ella had locked herself inside the penthouse, pacing by the window as the city below pulsed with noise. Each ring of her phone sent a spike of hope through her chest, but it was never him. Finally, exhaustion forced her to sit down. On the counter lay his sketch folder, the community center plans they had worked on together. She flipped through the pages slowly and noticed a small envelope tucked behind the last sheet. Her name was written on it in Adrian's handwriting. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a note and a single silver key. The note read, "If you are reading this, it means I could not stop what was coming. Do not trust anyone from the board. Go to the warehouse on 9th and River. You will find what they do not want the world to see." Her pulse raced. She had no idea what she was walking into, but something in her heart told her she had to go. She grabbed her coat, tucked the note in her pocket, and headed into the night. The rain had started again, light but relentless, soaking through her jacket as she hurried down the street. The warehouse stood at the edge of the riverfront, quiet except for the hum of distant traffic. She unlocked the heavy door with the key and stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and old paper. Rows of filing cabinets and computer servers lined the walls, most covered with sheets. Near the back, a single desk lamp glowed faintly. On the table were several thick folders labeled with Hale Industries logo. She opened the first one and gasped. It contained transaction records and internal emails, proof that a board member named Victor Lang had been leaking company data to competitors. Adrian had not vanished to escape the scandal. He had gone underground to collect evidence. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her. "You should not be here," a voice said. Ella turned to see Victor standing in the doorway, his expression dark. "You have no idea what you are doing, Miss Thompson." "I know you framed him," she said, her voice shaking but steady. "You leaked those files and you blamed Adrian." He smiled coldly. "You think anyone will believe a waitress pretending to be a millionaire's wife?" "It does not matter," she said, clutching the folder to her chest. "The truth is right here." He took a step closer. "Give me the documents." "No." For a moment neither moved. Then the sound of tires screeching cut through the rain outside. Another car had arrived. The warehouse door burst open, and Adrian stepped in, soaked eyes burning with anger. "Step away from her, Victor." The man froze. "You should have stayed gone," Victor sneered. "It would have been cleaner." "You made a mistake," Adrian said, voice low and steady. "You thought I would let you destroy everything my family built. You underestimated me." Victor lunged for the folders, but Adrian moved faster. The two men struggled, crashing against the desk. Papers scattered like snow. Ella backed away, clutching her phone. "Stop!" she cried, dialing emergency services. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Victor tried to flee, but Adrian caught him by the arm and threw him down just as police cars flooded the alley outside. Officers stormed in, weapons drawn. "He is the one you want," Adrian said, breathing hard. "The files prove it." Victor's face twisted as he was handcuffed and dragged away. The officers collected the evidence while paramedics checked Adrian's bruised hands. When they were finally alone, Ella looked at him, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. "You could have been killed," she whispered. "So could you," he replied softly. "Why did you come?" "Because you told me nothing would be canceled," she said. He smiled faintly, exhausted but alive. "And you believed me." She nodded. "I always did." For the first time, the words between them felt like the truth. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the hospital blinds, soft and golden. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, his left hand bandaged, his suit jacket draped over a chair. The night before had ended with the police taking Victor Lang into custody and the board publicly clearing Adrian of any wrongdoing. Yet exhaustion clung to him like a shadow. Ella sat in the chair beside him, still in her rain-soaked coat, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Neither spoke for a long time. It was the kind of silence that only existed between people who had seen too much together. Finally, Adrian broke it. "You should not have been there," he said quietly. "You could have been hurt." "You said the same thing last night," she replied. "And I said I do not care." His lips curved slightly, but the smile faded almost instantly. "You do not understand, Ella. I was never supposed to let you get this close. None of this was supposed to be real." She looked at him, her eyes tired but steady. "Then stop pretending it is not." He met her gaze, and for the first time since the day they met, he did not look like a man in control. "When we signed that contract, I thought I was buying silence, not finding a reason to feel again." The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and raw. "You found me when I was empty," he continued, "and somehow, you made me want to be more than a name on a building." Ella's heart ached at the sincerity in his voice. "You do not need to be more," she said softly. "You already are." Before he could respond, there was a knock on the door. A nurse entered with a stack of papers. "Mr. Hale," she said, "the media is waiting downstairs for your statement. The board has scheduled a press conference in 2 hours." Adrian nodded, his expression unreadable. When the nurse left, he looked at Ella. "This is where I fix everything," he said. "Then go fix it," she answered, standing up. "But this time, tell the truth. All of it." 2 hours later, the world watched live as Adrian Hale stepped up to the microphone. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but his voice remained calm. "There have been many rumors about me, my company, and my marriage," he began. "It is time to set the record straight. Yes, my marriage began as a contract, a foolish attempt to control a narrative I could not escape. But somewhere in the middle of pretending, I found something real." The crowd erupted in murmurs. "Her name is Ella Thompson," he continued. "She saved my company. She saved me." and she reminded me what integrity looks like. So for those wondering if this marriage was ever genuine, let me make it clear. He paused, eyes scanning the crowd until they found her standing near the back, her face half hidden beneath a hat. Nothing will be cancelled. The words were no longer a secret promise. They were a declaration. Applause burst across the room, and even the reporters lowered their cameras for a moment. When the conference ended, Adrian walked through the crowd straight to her. The noise faded around them. "You just told the entire world about us," she said, half laughing, half crying. "I had to," he replied. "It was the only truth worth telling." "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, taking her hand, "we stop pretending." The flash of cameras returned, but neither of them cared. They walked out of the building together into the bright spring air, free for the first time. That night, at the edge of the city, a new sign was installed at the entrance of the nearly finished community center. It read, "The Thompson Hale Foundation Built on Truth." As the workers packed up, Adrian and Ella stood beneath it, hand in hand, watching the letters glow under the streetlights. "This was your idea," she whispered. "Ours," he corrected. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the small silver ring she had once left behind. "You lost this," he said. "No," she whispered, tears forming. "I gave it back." "Then let me give it to you again," he said. "For real this time." Under the quiet hum of the city, he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Nothing will be cancelled," he said again, smiling. And this time it sounded exactly like forever. 1 year later, the city looked different. The skyline glowed brighter, and the Thompson Hale Foundation had become a symbol of second chances. The community center stood at the heart of downtown, filled with laughter, music, and the sound of brushes sweeping across canvases. Children painted murals on wide white walls, while volunteers served food in the courtyard. Ella moved among them, her sketchbook in one hand, her smile easy and unguarded. She had become the creative director of the foundation, the same dream she once thought belonged only to people with money and influence. Now, she was living it. Outside, a small crowd gathered as a black car pulled up to the curb. Adrian stepped out, wearing his usual tailored suit but with softer eyes. His company had recovered, stronger than ever, and his name was no longer followed by scandal but by respect. Yet when he saw her waiting by the door, none of that mattered. "You are late," she teased, pretending to check her watch. "I was busy convincing the board that community gardens are good investments," he replied, kissing her forehead. "You will never stop working," she said. "Neither will you," he countered with a grin. Together they walked through the hallways lined with art portraits of people whose lives the foundation had helped rebuild. At the far end of the gallery stood a large